Have you ever wondered why, over 150 years later, the American Civil War still feels so present? You see, its echoes everywhere in our politics, our culture, and even the maps of our cities. It's not just some dusty chapter in a history book. The Civil War was a seismic event that fundamentally reshaped the United States, and its aftershocks are still rumbling beneath our feet today. So, how exactly does a conflict from the 1860s continue to define America in the 21st century? Let's dive in and explore the long shadow of the Civil War. First, let us talk about the most obvious and profound legacy: the end of slavery and the struggle for civil rights. The 13th Amendment officially abolished slavery, but that was just the beginning of a long, painful journey. The Reconstruction era that followed was a brief, hopeful period where African Americans gained political power and basic rights. But this progress was brutally crushed. The rise of Jim Crow laws, segregation, and systemic discrimination created a new form of bondage. The civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s was, in many ways, a continuation of the fight for the promises of freedom that were left unfulfilled after the war. Today, debates over voting rights, racial justice, and systemic inequality are direct descendants of this unresolved history. When we talk about Black Lives Matter, we're talking about a struggle that began long before any of us were born, rooted in the failure of America to fully reckon with the legacy of slavery. Next, consider the massive shift in power between the federal government and the states. Before the Civil War, the United States was often described in the plural as "in these United States are." The prevailing belief, especially in the South, was that states had the ultimate authority and could even leave the Union if they chose. The war settled that question decisively. The victory of the Union established the supremacy of the federal government. This wasn't just a legal theory, it was cemented with blood. After the war, the federal government took on a much larger role in American life, from regulating the economy to enforcing civil rights through the 14th and 15th Amendments. This created the powerful central government we know today. Every time you see a debate about states' rights versus federal authority, whether it's about healthcare, education, or environmental policy, hearing an echo of the central constitutional question that led to the Civil War. The war also completely transformed the American economy. The pre-war South was agrarian, aristocratic, and reliant on enslaved labor. The North, by contrast, was rapidly industrializing. The Union's victory was a victory for industrial capitalism. The war effort itself spurred massive industrial growth, creating huge industries in steel, manufacturing, and railroads. This laid the groundwork for America's rise as a global economic superpower in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The Transcontinental Railroad, completed just 4 years after the war ended, physically stitched the nation together and opened the West, but it was a project born from the Union's strategic vision. This economic shift created immense wealth, but also led to new conflicts, labor disputes, vast income inequality, and the rise of powerful corporate monopolies. The Gilded Age, with all its glitter and grime, was a direct consequence of the economic world the Civil War created. And what about our national identity? The Civil War forced Americans to ask the most fundamental question: what does it mean to be an American? President Abraham Lincoln, in the Gettysburg Address, redefined the nation's purpose. He framed the war not just as a struggle to preserve the Union, but as a fight to ensure that a government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. He articulated a new birth of freedom, connecting the sacrifices of the soldiers to the nation's founding ideals of liberty and equality. This idea of a single, unified nation dedicated to a set of principles became the dominant American narrative. However, this narrative has always been contested. The Lost Cause myth, a romanticized version of the Confederacy that downplayed the role of slavery, emerged in the South as a way to cope with defeat. This competing identity has persisted, influencing everything from the monuments we build to the flags we fly. The culture wars that we see today are, in many ways, a continuation of this clash over our collective memory and national story. The war's impact is also literally written on the map. States like West Virginia exist only because they broke away from Virginia to remain in the Union. Cities like Atlanta were burned to the ground and then rebuilt, becoming symbols of the New South. The war also accelerated westward expansion. The Homestead Act of 1862, passed during the war, encouraged settlement in the West, displacing countless Native American tribes, and shaping the demographics and politics of states from Kansas to California. This westward push was part of the Union's vision for a continent-spanning, free labor nation. The military strategies and technologies developed during the war also had lasting effects. It was one of the first truly industrial wars, introducing trench warfare, repeating rifles, and ironclad ships. These innovations would be studied and adapted in future conflicts around the world, making the Civil War a grim turning point in the history of modern warfare. Finally, the psychological and emotional scars of the war run deep. With over 620,000 soldiers killed, it remains the deadliest conflict in American history. Nearly every family, North and South, was touched by loss. This collective trauma shaped generations. In the South, it fostered a sense of grievance and cultural defensiveness that can still be felt. In the North, the victory reinforced a sense of moral and national destiny. These regional identities, forged in the crucible of war, have proven incredibly durable. The political map today, with its red states and blue states, still bears a striking resemblance to the geographic divisions of the 1860s. Many of the cultural and political attitudes that define these regions can be traced back to the differing experiences and memories of the war and its aftermath. So, the Civil War isn't ancient history. It's a living history. It's in the DNA of our political system, our economy, and our ongoing struggle over what it means to be one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Understanding this conflict is not just about knowing the past. It's about understanding the America we live in right now. The debates it ignited are still the debates we're having today. The wounds it created are still in the process of healing. And the future of the American experiment still depends on how we choose to confront its complicated and powerful legacy. Thanks so much for watching. What are some other ways you see the Civil War's influence today? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this interesting, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the history that shapes our world.